Hey guys, how you doing? George back here again with you this evening. A bit of a rush job tonight. We've been planned this for a while now, but I've literally got back from the beach. Went down to Avon Beach this afternoon for a couple of hours with the kids, and lovely day. A little bit sunburnt maybe, but it was just a bit of a mad rush getting back. But fortunately, I made it. We're a few minutes late getting started this evening, and it's not just me tonight. So you're pleased to hear I am joined by psychotherapist and coach and friend of mine, Nova Woodrow. How you doing, Nova?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, no, thanks. I'm kind of really interested in what you've got to talk about tonight. I suspect there'll be a few others in the group who are equally, if not more so. And we've been in the same coaching group for a while now, but it was only really recently that we got chatting about some of the things you're up to and you've been doing, and some of your big visions. That made me think, there's some really interesting stuff here that would be amazing to share with this community in particular. So we're going to talk about imposter syndrome, and you want to talk about kind of the whole thing of isolation and the connection between the two as well. And you give me some very sort of cryptic bullet points as well with what we're going to be. I can't wait to see how Barry White comes into all this. But why don't we start off by kind of just give us a bit about your background. I've kind of introduced you as a psychotherapist and coach, but tell us a bit about what you do and where, kind of how you got into what you're doing.
Yeah, so I've been a psychotherapist for about 18 years now, so I've been doing it a long time. But I've also trained as a teacher and taught for a long time alongside doing the psychotherapy private client stuff. And there was definitely a need there for psychology or just an understanding of how the mind works and how you're able to take control of your own mind and thoughts and feelings and things like that, and move it into a space that wasn't really being able to access it at the moment. So the first thing that I did was actually to go into the corporate world, because there was a lot of stress and depression and anxiety going on. And there wasn't really anything in place that would help them understand how they could be in charge of that, the people themselves being in charge of that. So that's sort of where it came into more of a business rather than just psychotherapy private clients. But also because of having the teaching background as well, I'm very passionate about the fact that education at the moment is offering an academic route, but it's not giving kids and young people the tools that they need to be able to cope within a world where the psychological side of things is often being left out of their learning, and the understanding of how mindset is really important to help you just cope generally with life, and how actually there are lots of ways in which you are able to be in control of your thoughts and feelings, and that has a massive impact on how empowered you feel in your day-to-day life and your ability to handle those things for yourself. So that's my next big project, is taking a positive psychology stance in schools.
Yeah, I mean, that's really exciting. A huge kind of vision that you've got of actually introducing what your experiences have been and what your knowledge is into the curriculum, which is phenomenal to actually have access to that as a part of the curriculum as you're growing up, through your teens into becoming a young adult. How much better equipped would be going into the real world with those skill sets, those resources at our disposal. So that's phenomenal. I'm kind of very the hats off to you for what you're trying to achieve with that. So what we have on the agenda for this evening, and we'll try and keep it kind of as succinct as possible, because one of the things that I know these guys, the Hughes guys, have in common is that they're pretty tight on time, and we'll get stuck into the content pretty quickly. I've talked about imposter syndrome with the assumption that everybody knows what it is, but let's kind of get down to the nuts and bolts. What is imposter syndrome, first of all?
So imposter syndrome is nearly always felt by people who are already high achievers. And it's basically that feeling that you are a fraud, or that you're going to get found out for not being who you said you are, or that you're not going to live up to the expectations that other people have of you or that you have of yourself.
Now, I only first came across this about 4 or 5 years ago, perhaps, when I was having a coaching session of my own. And my coach said, when I was explaining to her how I felt about stuff, she said, "That's pretty common, George. It's called imposter syndrome." I was like, "What? You mean not only is it common, there's a name for it?" And it was a real sort of revelation to me. It actually made me feel a little bit better that I wasn't just kind of being weird by feeling like that. But that doesn't really kind of help with what to then do about it, other than feeling that, you know, other people also experience that. And I understand there's been quite a few very famous, very successful people who have had and still have imposter syndrome. Is this something you see quite commonly with people that you've worked with, Nova?
Yeah, it's common to virtually all of them. In fact, I don't think I've actually had a client that or even within a corporate world, I don't think I've known anybody who hasn't at some time felt imposter syndrome or struggled with imposter syndrome.
Okay, so if imposter syndrome is your sense of self, or the sense of your own ability is less than your actual ability, is there something kind of the opposite of that? Other people out there whose sense of their own ability is actually far greater than their own abilities?
Yeah, you can have an overinflated sense of self sometimes, definitely. But that's generally actually just masking underlying fears. It's generally not something that they genuinely feel. It's sort of a wall. It's a mask that they've built to cope. Okay, cool. And when we talk about, well, actually, no, I'm going to go. I can't hold off my intrigue anymore. What has Barry White got to do? We want to know what to do about this. So, what's Barry White got to do with anything? Well, do you know, I'd actually lined up some Barry White music for you on my phone, but I just read the terms on Google, and I'm not allowed to play.
Oh no! What was it going to be?
So it was that one. What's it called?
My first. My last, my everything, by any chance?
No, You Sexy Thing.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it's You Sexy Thing. So, you know, it starts with sort of like the boom, 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 that really kind of like seductive music. So, so Barry White represents a very special moment, and I want you to picture in your mind now your parents one night getting sexy with each other and deciding that that was the night that they were going to create you. And Barry White is kind of that reminder, that little trigger of how special you are, because actually imposter syndrome is this idea that we have to be something more than we are, and what we already are is something, a miracle. Because if you're defining a miracle as something that is so unlikely that it's almost impossible, then every single one of us actually fits that definition. Because the chances of us being here is so minute that it's almost impossible that we even made it here. And yet we are so stuck on living up to something other than who we are. And who we are is the most amazing thing ever. So the whole idea of imposter syndrome, obviously, it is an illusion. We know it's an illusion logically, but it comes from this feeling that we have externalized our idea of how special we are rather than internalizing it. And if you can use that Barry White analogy, it just triggers that memory that, you know, you are in your own right the only thing that you can be, which is who you are. Okay,
no, I like that. I'm going to listen to Barry White in a very different way from now on. You mentioned about kind of externalizing things, or internalizing things rather than externalizing things. So by internalizing, you mean about kind of listening to Barry White, for example, and thinking, okay, well, actually, the fact that I'm here is pretty incredible. You know, even just surviving is amazing, and actually getting to this point in time. So that will be internalizing, which is something that we perhaps forget to do. So when you say externalizing, do you mean we look for external validation of, you know, of who we are? Our sense of self comes from what other people say to us. Is that how you mean by externalization?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's a downfall and a good thing that that's how we're taught to view ourselves. You know, we're constantly measured throughout our lives against other people, and it's how we've built our society, it's how we've built our education system, it's how we understand how we measure up to other people, and it's, you know, our whole structure is built around externalizing our view of ourselves. But it's also why we've got such a massive mental health problem, because we have not been shown how to internalize it. Okay, so when you talk about being shown how to internalize it, is that as simple as saying,
don't forget to internalize it as well. Or are there strategies, are there things that we can do that can help us really, believe and kind of remind ourselves more regularly about how amazing, our existence really is?
Yeah, because, obviously you can just say to yourself, what I need to do is internalize it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to do it, because it's one thing to say it and one thing to do it. So there are strategies that I use with my clients that help them internalize things a little bit more. And some of them, and it's like anything else, you actually have to do it regularly for it to become internalized. So for you to gain a deeper understanding and to actually for you to take that on board on a deeper level that will last, then you have to sort of do these things regularly. Okay. So one of the things that I do is to recommend to my clients that they actually keep a file or a list or something that just shows them what all their achievements are. Because we so often attribute what has happened in our lives to luck or to the grace of God or something else that happened or someone else that helped us. And we forget that, we had a part to play in that as well. Mm. So if you can actually have a physical reminder of that with a list that just writes down, and that can be like even tiny things like you passed your driving test, or, you got a swimming certificate when you were 12, it doesn't matter as long as you are reminding yourself, look how far I've come and look how many things I achieved on the way.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's one really good way.
Well, that's I love the idea of kind of having this file. So anytime you're feeling a little bit like, things aren't going my way, you can just flick that open and look through it and think, actually, you know what? I'm not doing too badly. Yeah. But I work with, when I'm working with my clients, to talk about kind of the victory log. And you probably do something similar, Nova, where you write down these tiny little victories on a daily basis as well. And I recommend just doing like 3 things. So you're just jotting down 3 things, 3 wins from the day. Because you're so right, we're very, very quick to attach, sort of look at the negative things, the things we didn't get right, the things we failed on, but also things that we did do, to attribute them to other sources, external forces of nature, people who have helped us, or perhaps even playing it down, the significance of it. So by focusing on the things that we have done, it just draws your attention to them and starts to get the old reticular activator system working and looking for more of these things that we have achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of, I worked with a young girl fairly recently, and she was having a lot of problems at school. She was being bullied at school. She's only 7, but she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. She felt she didn't fit in anywhere. She wasn't good enough. And for her, because she was quite young, she didn't have a lot of conditioning going on that had already got in the way. She was able to very quickly turn it around by doing something. And she actually, we made a board, like just a pin board, and she had a stack of post-it notes. And every time she came home, she would write down one thing on each post-it note that was really good about the day, or that she managed to do during the day that she was proud of. And it changed her whole world just doing that. Wow. And she suddenly realized the value that she had, and it just changed the way that she thought about herself, which of course impacted everything else.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's about perception and perspective. Yeah. So you can have the same things. Why 2 people can look at the same situation, and one person can kind of see it in one way, and another person can see exactly the same situation in a very different way. But I love the idea that actually, if you're not naturally inclined to seeing things positively, you can train yourself to becoming more inclined. It's not something that you're naturally, you have, or you're better at than other people. You do or can improve your ability to do that. So I love that idea of keeping that file as well. What else? You mentioned there were a couple of things. Is there anything else you do with clients to help them, get this inner sense of self?
Yeah, I think, there's loads of them, but one of them is another one that is actual a practical exercise that you can do. Is to write down every single day for 21 days the answer to finishing the sentence, I am amazing at. And write down all of the things that you feel you're amazing at. When you start off, you'll probably just write something like nothing or hardly anything. And it'll be hard for things to come to mind, perhaps, especially if you're in a bit of a funk or whatever, or you're feeling down on yourself. but gradually over time, you begin to maybe repeat things, and that doesn't matter, but you'll come up with more and more things that you are really good at, that you're amazing at, that you bring to the table. And just gradually over those 21 days, you're internalizing it. So every single time you write it, you're internalizing it, and it changes the way that you see it.
Yeah, that is powerful. Actually, I remember sitting in a Jack Canfield seminar earlier this year, and he got the room doing something very similar. And amazing, actually, how hard. We had 60 seconds each doing it with a partner we'd never met before. Awkward. Saying to another person, "I'm amazing at."
Yeah.
Like, I don't look like a dick here. So it's really hard to kind of own that and to kind of actually say, "Yeah, I'm pretty good at these things." So I love the idea of kind of writing it down as well. So do you suggest doing one thing a day, one different thing a day for 21 days, or as many as you can?
Yeah, write down as many as you can every day, and aim for more than you did the previous day. And it doesn't matter if you repeat the things, because repetition is good, but keep trying to expand upon it. But write as much as you can every day, not just one or two things.
Cool. You talked about the next little bullet point you gave me was the dichotomy of belonging, which again is equally intriguing as the Barry White reference. So what does it mean by the dichotomy of belonging, and what's it got to do with imposter syndrome?
So every time that we look to belong somewhere, we automatically separate ourselves from something else. So that's the dichotomy, is that every time we belong, we also separate. Okay. So whatever community we're part of, the family that we're part of, the groups that we are a part of, when we belong there, we no longer belong in another place. So there's always belonging and separation. And the key thing there is that because there is always both, the one that you will experience the most of is the one that you're giving the most attention to. So you will always belong somewhere and be separate from somewhere else. But the key is to place your attention on the place where you belong. And so often we have the grass is greener thing going on, and we kind of look at other groups, or we look at other friendships, or we look at other families or relationships, and we go, oh, they've got it really good, or I want to be there and not here. And what you're constantly doing is reinforcing in your mind separation instead of belonging. So if you can concentrate always on appreciating where you already belong, you'll have less of a sense of separation, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, do you have any examples of that from your own life where that's shown up? That feeling of kind of wanting to be a part of, another group, and kind of focusing on that, what you haven't got, rather than the groups and the belonging that you do have. Any kind of real life examples from your own world?
Yeah, I think for me, I've recently, actually, I lived in Dorset for about 14 years. And in the last 3 years, I've moved back to where I grew up, because I always had that sense that was where I belonged. And I had, where I was living in Dorset, I was a single mum, and I was also teaching in the local school a lot of the time. So I felt a real sense of isolation from the local community, because I was the teacher, so I was slightly separate. So I wasn't their friend, I was the teacher of their child. And I had a lot of that going on. And what I wasn't seeing was that I already belonged within that community that I was in. I just didn't appreciate it for what it was. But coming back home, which is where I always felt more of a sense of belonging, has in fact given me that security that I was looking for. But it's also made me realize that the security that I was looking for was simply a sense of being myself, and being back home allowed me to be myself. So that was what I was really looking for. And it's really what we're all looking for.
So once you've kind of identified the areas that we're focusing more on the separation rather than the belonging, what are your recommendations for doing to kind of look at why we feel that way? Or is there more of an idea, like with the victories, to kind of start shifting our attention back to what we, the belonging that we do have, rather than the separation?
Yeah, because I think sometimes we spend too long on the why. Why do I feel this way? And at the end of the day, it's useful a lot of the time, but it can also just stop us from moving forward. It's a good place to get stuck, is why. So often it's much better just to simply shift your attention. And you can do that in exactly as you said, with like the victory things. So if you're showing appreciation for where you are, just writing down like a few things about, oh, it was, you know, I loved talking to such and such on the phone today, or, you know, I hugged my boyfriend and it was, you know, it was a lovely time to spend there. And appreciating the belonging that you already have, instead of looking at where you would prefer to be.
Okay, well, you mentioned about community there and your own experiences of community down in Dorset. Now, St Hugh's College is a community in and of itself, and we've created this virtual community, which is a bit kind of strange having a virtual community within a real physical community. But the whole idea of community is so important, and connection for me is one of the 5 core elements of well-being, as important, if not more so, than nutrition and exercise and mindset recovery. Connection is right up there. So my dog's chucking a bit of antler around.
Yeah.
For a second. When you talk about, hang on a second. Wooden floors and antlers don't go well together. There she is.
Oh.
Right. She hasn't been on her own all day, but she hasn't seen us all day. So now I can come straight back on the webinar. So she wants to come. But later, we'll play later. I'm not gonna give back to her because it'll be too loud. So let's talk about community then. What's your kind of view on community and how important that is with everything that we're talking about this evening?
Yeah, massively important, massively important. And there are so many studies that have shown that when you dig down to the core of what is the most important ingredient of happiness, or the most important ingredient of success, it always comes back to community.
Sorry. I was checking her at Bonio. Up there, sorry, distracted. No, so so unprofessional. No, okay, I was listening there. I was listening. And community is something it's kind of innate, isn't it? It's not something that's a new thing. Perhaps it's in the last maybe few decades that we've become a bit more isolated within the physical communities that we live in. Certainly things like, you know, smartphones and virtual connection haven't helped with that. And we're probably, as human beings, still kind of getting our heads around the idea of being able to be connected, theoretically connected to other people, 24/7. So do you, when you kind of look at a community like St Hugh's, which is one of the colleges within the wider community of Oxford University, which is a part of the wider community of the nation's universities and the educational system, how do you feel, where does imposter syndrome kind of fit in with all of that, and how can community help rather than be part of the problem in this case?
Well, I think because the idea of imposter syndrome being that you feel a fraud, the more that you can be around people who are like-minded, or who have the same kind of beliefs or the same kind of ideas about life, not only does that give you a sense of community, and it helps you in some ways to explore and feel less of an imposter because you're around people who feel the same way as you do. But it also gives you that dichotomy that we need to be able to establish who we are. So we are always learning about ourselves in relation to how we experience our life. So if we are experiencing something like imposter syndrome, for example, then it tells us something about ourselves. So, and we can then act in light of it. So every relationship that we come across, or every communication that we have, is giving us an opportunity to understand who we are and who we want to be in light of that relationship and what we've learned from it. So community gives us a chance to understand who we are, because it shows us what we want and what we don't want, according to who we like and who we don't like, and what we experience and what we don't experience. But it also allows us to have a community of people who think like us, and therefore help us to feel less like an imposter in our own lives.
Yeah, and again, going back to my own experience of this, and I had massive challenges with this when I was, for the first decade of my professional career anyway, kind of constantly waiting to be found out. And part of that came from I came from a university background with a master's degree in engineering, going into a personal training environment where everyone had didn't have degrees, but they'd been on proper 3-month-long personal training diploma courses, and I'd done, apart from working with my my kind of university athletics squad, working with the circuit team there, and doing a kind of a basic level 2 gym instructing qualification. I was down here and they were up there with regards to qualification. So I was kind of constantly looking over my shoulder, and it was holding me back because I didn't want to progress too much, because I knew that the higher I got and the bigger the profile I had, the more chance would be of somebody saying, actually, hang on a second, you're not qualified to be saying that. Who are you to be telling people to do this or that? And where's your degree in this subject? So it was a kind of a really big thing for me, and I know that it held me back. I know that it influenced the decisions that I made, certainly in the early years. So kind of now taking that to the context of the St. Hugh's group, everybody in the Boost St. Hugh's group and at the college will have been at the top of the game at school. They would have been the if not the smartest, certainly one of the smartest kids in school, who then gets to go off to Oxford University. It's one of the most prestigious universities in the world. So with that in mind, then all of a sudden you're with a lot of other people. For me, who were in the same position, for me, realizing that other people felt the same way, maybe for different reasons, but they still felt this whole kind of looking over your shoulder, when am I going to get caught and found out? And slung out of university, or slung out, in my case, slung out of professional personal training, which of course is never going to happen. For me, it was kind of realizing that other people felt the same way. Do you think that it's as simple as that, to kind of realize that you're not alone? This is a real thing, and other people around you who seem to have it together. That's the thing. People who seem to be kind of have everything going for themselves, and they've got all figured out. They're probably suffering from the same sort of thing as well. Is that enough of a shift of perception to help move away from imposter syndrome?
Yeah, it can be. I think a lot of people still find that difficult. I mean, being able to say to yourself, when you're feeling like that, this is just imposter syndrome, can help you just to realize that it's just something that you're experiencing. It's not something about who you are. So it doesn't mean you're a fraud. It means you're experiencing the feeling of being a fraud. And the two things are different. And I think the other thing is that we forget that the best policy with anything like that is to be honest. And because you cannot fail at being who you are. You cannot, it's actually impossible for you to be an imposter in your own life, because no one else can be who you are. So it's absolutely impossible for you to be an imposter if you are being who you are. And the best way to do that is to be honest about who you are. And if you're worried about, you don't have the qualifications, or you're worried about that you're not living up to the expectations of those around you, is to own that and say it.
So when you say be honest and own it and say it, do you mean like to yourself first of all, or to other people, like close friends, talk to them about it as well? What's the best way of, creating that level of honesty within yourself?
I think, yeah, first of all, being honest with yourself, but not to the level where you're actually doing yourself an injustice and you're keeping it in perspective, but talking about it to other people, because everyone feels like this at times. Everyone's going to understand that. So it's not as if you're going to talk about it and they'll go, what? Don't know what you're talking about. Most people can relate to it. But also when you're in a situation where somebody is saying, I've got this qualification, have you? And you being completely okay with saying, no, I haven't. And that being enough.
Yeah.
Who cares? You're still there. You're still doing what you're doing. And at the end of the day, the only person it's an issue for is them. If they're making an issue out of it, it doesn't have to be an issue for you. Okay.
Makes sense. Very good. And one of the other things on your list, I think the last thing actually on the list was the need to belong versus significance. What do you mean by that?
So when we are looking at, belonging and significance seem sometimes like they don't go together very well, because we tend to think of significance or significant people as people who have stepped out of the box or who have stepped out of their comfort zone and have become something bigger than the rest of us, if you like. If you know, I don't mean that literally, but that's often how we perceive it. So we are caught constantly between this idea of wanting to belong, which partly means we want to fit in and be the same, but at the same time we have a great need for significance, which requires us to not necessarily belong, but to actually be a leader and find a new place to belong that maybe you go first to establish and then wait for other people to come. And that's quite a scary place to be. So our need for both of those things can sometimes also help us to, can also be a place where we get stuck. So we want to be great at what we do. We want to be more than we are now, but at the same time, we want to fit in and be the same. So there can often be a real conflict there.
Yeah. Okay. And certainly a lot of the people who I know who have stepped outside the norm, which is, they say it's one of the worst things we can do as far as our survival instinctive brains are concerned, to be too different to the rest of the tribe. So it does take something. I mean, that in itself, the tribe is who we belong to, but then to be different, like public speaking, isn't it? Like, that's one of the reasons we don't like public speaking, is because we're there, judge me, which has a lot of kind of potential danger and threat with it as far as kind of psychological threats concerned. So, but the idea of actually stepping up and being significant, or needing that significance by being different. Are you saying that it's kind of, you can have the both? You can have the belonging, which is something that we all need, some to a greater or lesser extent, but also the significance, which we can also strive to achieve, and we can actually keep both of them instead of one alienating ourselves from the other.
Yeah, because all of these things as a bigger picture fit together. Because if we have a really strong sense of community or a really strong sense of connection within the tribe, no matter how small it is, maybe it's just, a tribe of 2, it doesn't matter. If you have a really strong sense of self within that and an appreciation for that, then you are able to go from that safe place and achieve the significance whilst also belonging. The problem comes from when we don't appreciate, or we don't pay our attention to where we already belong, which means we don't have that secure base from which to go out and explore the world. I
get it. Well, we've covered everything that you had in your bullet points there, Nova. Was there anything else that you think is kind of relevant, or anything else you want to add into what we've already discussed this evening?
Well, I could go on forever, literally. But
well, okay. Well, go ahead. I've got one more question to you, but you fire away.
I think the most important thing, that if you take away anything from this, the most important thing would be the fact that you cannot, it is absolutely impossible for you to be an imposter if you're being yourself. And that's all life requires of you. It doesn't require anything else than you just step into the fact that you are different and the same at the same time, and that is okay. Okay.
Now, if somebody is struggling with this, what is the kind of thing that is likely to help? Maybe try some of the systems and the strategies that we've talked about this evening, still finding it's a struggle, and perhaps having a negative impact on ability to focus and ability to enjoy life, both in college and outside as well. What are some of the steps that people can take to get kind of more help? Is it work with someone like you or another professional? What's the best thing to do, would you say?
I think the first step is always to confide how you're feeling in someone that you trust. So, whether it's your parents, whether it's a close friend, just getting it out there that's how you're feeling is a really good step, because first of all, it takes all of the fear and the stuff that's going on inside and externalizes it. So it's taking it away from you, and it just dilutes it a bit straight away. But the other thing is, obviously, if you want to talk to somebody and have that deeper look at where you are and what's going on, then yes, talking to a counsellor, and I'm sure there's probably one at the university, or a coach or anything like that is of course helpful as well. But certainly start with where you are, and start with who's around you, because they will listen if you are able to open up to them.
I mean, I often think what it would have been like for me if I'd come across this phenomenon, 10 years before I did. I mean, I'd literally been having this issue, this challenge for 10 years in my professional life, and I was doing okay. I was writing for some of the, some major fitness magazines at that point. I've been kind of national press, and every time anything came out, as well as feeling kind of proud and significant, I always felt like I was really sticking my head above the parapet, just waiting for someone to say, I'm just going to check this guy's qualifications out and kind of where he's come from, because something doesn't stack up. So if I'd actually understood all this 10 years previously, what a difference that would have made in my life. I can only imagine. So I hope that those who've been listening this evening and who watch it on demand, on catch up, it gives some sense of how common this is, but also you've shared some amazing tactics and strategies that we can start deploying immediately to really start combating this, and to own, as I said, own who we are, and to be no one can be us. If we are being ourselves and being honest with ourselves and with other people, then it's impossible to be an imposter. So no, but thank you for your time. Thanks for your time this evening. It's been much appreciated. We'll get some feedback from the guys as well, and I'll share that with you. But it's been really, really helpful. Thanks a million.
Thank you for having me.